Jeff Stein is someone who covers national economic policy for the Washington Post. He's a great reporter and has been extremely helpful in providing up to the date, up to the minute updates on the latest in the ongoing drama regarding the potential for there to be $2,000 checks sent out in direct payment relief to Americans as part of the COVID relief bill. He recently appeared on Rising and he was being asked about his thoughts on the likelihood of the bill ultimately being passed and to expand on the $600 checks that have already been approved as part of the latest round of COVID relief after 8 months. So I've covered that on here. What I really wanted to discuss right now was some really interesting comments that Jeff made that I think his unique authority on this issue in his experience covering national economic policy and the politics around that. And that is that this idea that the cultural impacts of this debate over whether or not Americans should get paid $2,000 in direct relief from the federal government has basically radically transformed the culture, the American culture, in a way that we haven't seen in modern American history. So, as you guys will recall, last March, as part of the CARES Act, which was the first large $3 trillion spending bill that was passed in order to boost the economy following the economic collapse ensuing from the pandemic that we're now in. There was a $1,200 direct payment, and what we've learned since that time is that $1,200 payment, in combination with the $600 a week in enhanced unemployment insurance benefits that was also passed as part of that CARES Act relief, combined to basically actually bring down poverty. So this was the first time. This is something that Jeff Stein, again, his insight on this is very important because he does this for a living, cover the politics around economic policy. He noted that this is the first time, probably in modern American history, that we've seen direct action from Congress in the form of legislation so concretely and materially impact Americans so clearly, and that it has basically transformed the politics around austerity and around this idea that is an especially American, it's an international phenomenon. I would describe it more as a Western sort of Reagan-Thatcher phenomenon across the Western world, but particularly American phenomenon that dates back at least 40 years, at least to the beginning of the 80s, since the start of the Reagan administration, and it's a bipartisan project, which is something that I discuss on here often, to sow distrust in Americans in the notion that the government is capable of serving the public interest, as opposed to just what it always does, which is promote austerity, rugged individualism for the poor and the working class, and straight up corporate socialism for the ultra wealthy and the corporations. Right? So there's always been that really insidious double standard that's at play with regards to the priorities, and it's always justified in this sort of rhetoric of deficit deficit hawking, right? It's always a myth of scarcity when it comes to uh, attending to the needs and the interests of poor people with regards to the social safety net and the welfare state, and reforming those quote unquote entitlements, tightening up our belt in order to get serious about tackling the debt and the deficit. That's the rhetoric that you always hear. It's always about the debt and the deficit, particularly when a Democrat takes office. Like when it's Bill Clinton or President Obama in office, all you ever heard the Republicans crow about was the debt and deficit. And so the myth of scarcity and, we've got to be fiscally responsible and fiscally conservative. But now here's the thing. We have a situation here where we have the leader of the Republican Party in Donald Trump publicly endorsing, publicly pushing for and pressuring Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans to give out $2,000 checks. Can you imagine in any alternate reality where Hillary Clinton is president, or in any previous Democratic administration, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, etc., where you have a situation where 44 House Republicans voted alongside the Democrats in the House in favor of passing $2,000 in direct check payments for Americans. A straight up or down vote, standalone bill, yes or no. That actually passed in the House with 2/3 of the membership. It passed overwhelmingly. There were still, I believe, over 100 dissenters, Republicans. Of course, that's to be expected, right? But the fact that you had that many Republicans, 44, siding with the Democrats, and then it's gone to the Senate, and it hasn't passed out of the Senate, but you've had now 6 Republican senators also publicly come out in favor of, including Marco Rubio, Deb Fischer of Nebraska, Senator Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, the 2 Republican senators that are up for re-election next week in Georgia, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, and Marco Rubio in Florida. So you've had those 6, and then you've had obviously resistance from Mitch McConnell and the more deficit hawkish Republicans in the caucus in the Senate pushing back, and there's been this tug of war over whether or not to hold a vote, because Mitch McConnell doesn't want the Republicans that are against the bill, that are not in favor, to go on the record with their vote against this relief in the lead up to this critical election, which will decide control of the Senate next week. So Mitch McConnell is playing this game, but the pressure coming from the president, the Republican president, is the catalyst here, right? That's the whole engine, because there is no way that under an alternate reality where Hillary Clinton is now president, there is no way that you get even a single Republican to come out in favor of $2,000 expansion. You see what I'm saying? And look, Donald Trump just got 74 million votes. Now, granted, he lost the election, but he got record turnout. I mean, 74 million votes for a loser is unprecedented. I mean, that's historic turnout, one way or another, like it or hate it. And that's what I'm saying is, this has radically shifted the politics around the notion around the concept of redistribution of wealth, around the concept of the welfare state. All these notions that were previously taboo, and there's an ongoing debate as to the question of whether the American culture flows downstream from the politics, or whether the American politics flow downstream from the culture. There's that constant tension. And it's my opinion that the American culture has always been, right? It's this bipartisan consensus that exalts, that idealizes, worships at the altar of this idea of personal responsibility, right? The American dream. If you just try hard enough, man, then that could be you. You know what I mean? This is, if you're poor, it's because of some moral failing. Come on, man. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps and take personal responsibility and fuck Castro. All right, we're against that Castro shit. This is all about personal responsibility and pulling yourself out, right? So that's the message that permeates down from the culture. But that's come down, really. That kind of messaging has been the bipartisan consensus really since at least the start of the 80s under Reagan, if not arguably the end of the 70s under Carter. But that's the culture that's coming down. Then Bill Clinton comes in, Democrat, in the early 90s and says, well, the era of big government is over, right? And then he starts to radically reform the welfare state. In other words, make cuts too. And we're seeing it now, frankly. Joe Biden, we now know, was active behind the scenes in the negotiations over the latest COVID relief bill. He was basically a moderating influence on the Democrats to the extent that he basically gave them permission to go with their gut. That back when we were discussing whether or not the checks should be $1,200. Remember, $600 is ultimately what ended up getting passed, but $600 was the compromise, right? There were 98 senators that sided with only 20% of the American public that were saying that they didn't think that another round of stimulus checks was necessary. That was the position of 20% of Americans. 80% of Americans were in favor of another round of stimulus checks. Remember, the last round of checks hadn't gone out since March, and you had 98 senators that were in favor in the beginning, in the early stages of the COVID relief bill negotiations. You had 98 senators that were ready to pass $0 in direct payment relief, $0.00. If not for the valiant efforts of two senators, Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders, Republican and independent Bernie Sanders caucuses with Democrats, obviously, coming together across the aisle to buck that bipartisan consensus, we would have gotten nothing at all. All right, so we ended up coming down to $600. That was the compromise, $600 better than nothing. But Joe Biden was working behind the scenes to give those Democrats permission that were still sort of conflicted about this question of $1,200 when Bernie and Hawley were applying pressure. You had Joe Biden sort of intervening with his influence as a president-elect to basically grant them permission to go with their gut that, you know what, actually, more austerity is always best. Come on, guys. You guys know how we do here. Just go with your gut here. Austerity for the working class, socialism for the rich. You guys know how we do here. American dream, personal responsibility. We don't want to be like Venezuela and fuck Castro and all that. Let's just give them $600 and be done with it. Now that Donald Trump, however, has come out on Twitter, to his credit, whether his intentions are honest or not, I happen to believe that he's not. This is not really a top priority for him, given how sloppy and incompetent he approached his own role in these negotiations. He basically was a non-factor all throughout, and basically came out only at the very end when the bill came to his desk, and a PR stunt, that 4-minute speech at the Oval Office, at the very last minute to put pressure back on the Senate, saying, "I will not sign this. These checks are ridiculously low." See, I don't think he was so concerned with the principle. I think this was more about getting back at Mitch McConnell. He's butthurt because Mitch McConnell chose to recognize President-elect Biden as the next president. So because he basically chose to break from Trump on his shenanigans with the voter fraud and all that. Trump's trying to rig the election, basically. So Trump is trying to now gum up the works for Mitch McConnell, make his life miserable. That's what I believe. But whether or not you trust that he's coming from an honest place, and I don't, you still got to give the guy credit. That's a Republican president coming out here and lobbying in favor of $2,000 checks. Now that puts immense pressure on a Joe Biden and a Kamala Harris, the incoming administration, to now get behind $2,000, because now you can't be seen as a Democrat. The Democrats are supposed to be the representatives of the working people. You can't afford to be seen as a Democrat when you have a Republican coming out publicly pushing for $2,000. You can't be coming out pushing for $600. Are you kidding me? So now that puts pressure on Joe Biden, and we know Joe Biden, he's got an ugly record too. We've got video of him for the last 40 years on the Senate floor calling for cuts to Social Security and Medicare. You've seen the YouTube clips, right? When I talked about entitlement reform, I meant Social Security. I meant Medicare. Everybody's seen the clips. When President Barack Obama became president in that first year in 2009, one of their top priorities, Biden and Obama, was creating a commission. It was called the Simpson-Bowles Commission, and their sole purpose, their sole task, was to look into, to investigate and come up with the most efficient means of entitlement reform, particularly Social Security reform. So Biden is not the answer to our prayers on this, for sure. But now you got a Donald Trump, you got a Republican president coming out strongly putting his foot down in favor of $2,000, whether it's a PR stunt or not. Again, I think I doubt his intentions are noble, especially since he's also coming down on this, tacking it on to an investigation into widespread voter fraud and the Section 230 repeal. All those are non-starters with the Democrats. And Mitch McConnell has wisely, in order to avoid bringing this up to a standalone $2,000 for a vote and making the Republicans who are against it look bad when they vote against, Mitch McConnell is choosing to tack all these things together into a package that he knows the Democrats won't vote for. So that's McConnell's play. But Donald Trump putting this pressure. Now you got Joe Biden coming out publicly in favor of, and so obviously reluctantly, but you got Joe Biden, Democrat, coming out in favor of $2,000 checks, because what's he going to do? You just got the Republican president. You see what I'm saying? You got Republican congressmen that voting in favor of $2,000. That's a direct result of the influence of Donald Trump, the leader of the Republican Party and most popular Republican politician in the country. 74 million votes. I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, love it or hate it. Donald Trump is the most popular, influential Republican politician in the country. And I also want to mention Kamala Harris in this. Kamala Harris, before she was appointed vice president, before she got the VP nod, she co-sponsored, she was one of the leading co-sponsors of a bill to get basically a UBI, a $2,000 a month check in the form of a UBI out to Americans. And then, of course, Biden taps her for VP, and Kamala Harris is MIA on this issue for the last 5 months. So it's Biden, it's Kamala, it's the Democratic Party, right? And but that's been the culture, right? It's been this philosophy of hard-nosed austerity for the working class, socialism, crony capitalism for the rich, for the wealthy. And you got this new kind of politics, this sort of realignment politics coming from the Republican end, obviously from the left. But when you get a Republican president, that really that shuffles the deck a little bit in terms of the dynamics. I mean, that puts enormous pressure on Senate and House Republicans. And so I think that it seems like just yesterday we were having this debate during the Andrew Yang campaign for president about $1,000 a month checks. Remember, that was his sole platform, was the $1,000 a month UBI. That was Yang's thing. And Yang, to his credit, he managed to really mainstream that idea, but his campaign ultimately ended up going nowhere, right? He dropped out, after New Hampshire, the second state. And so he was still ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, a very minor candidate. But now here we are. It's almost a year later, just less than a year later. And now we're all, and this is something Jeff Stein, again, noting in his unique capacity, right? His authoritative capacity as a journalist who covers national economic policy and the cultural impacts of that for a living, that he thinks that, this has radically shifted the culture and the Overton window and the discourse with regards to how we perceive in this country the government's role, the government's ability to actually meaningfully and materially help people and benefit people. And it's really heartening because, again, it puts pressure on the corporate Democrats, who we know are about to take power, are about to take over the presidency. And whether or not the $2,000 passes, and at this point, it seems highly unlikely. I'm going to do another video about that in a moment, that we are going to get the $2,000 checks. And ironically, because of the betrayal of the corporate Democrats, Chuck Schumer and Kamala Harris among them. I'll do a video on that in a moment. So it seems unlikely that the battle in the short term over this issue, government paying people, that this battle will be successful. But in terms of winning the war, in terms of the long term political, cultural, social dynamics at play here around this idea of transfer of wealth in this country, I gotta say, I think there's no going back here. I think Donald Trump, to his credit, like him or hate him, and again, I think he has all the wrong intentions in the world. I wouldn't trust the guy to mow my lawn if I had a lawn. But you got to give Donald Trump, and obviously Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley as well, and AOC and Rashida Tlaib, who've been promoting their own $2,000 House bill on Twitter. You got to give all these guys credit, but definitely give Donald Trump credit on this. I mean, this Mitch McConnell and those deficit hawking Republicans in the Senate do not want this kind of politics to take hold over the Republican Party. And this is really their worst nightmare. And you can see Mitch McConnell, for all his savvy and all his brilliance in wielding power and towing that corporatist, line in the Republican caucus in Washington. This has been for him. He's really had to reckon with this. And ahead of the Georgia elections, this could cost Republicans. This could actually cost them. Remember, we're less than a week out from those critical races on Tuesday coming up. This could actually cost Loeffler and Perdue their seats, and the Republicans control the Senate. And it will be, make no mistake about it, because of this single issue, it will be Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans' refusal to put $2,000 up just for a vote, because Americans are not stupid. This McConnell thinks that he can hide his incumbents, he can shield them, he can protect them by having them, pretend that they support it. They really don't, by the way, but come out on the record, yeah, I support it. But if you won't bring it up for a vote, remember, Americans are already tired of non-action from our politicians. We elect our politicians to do a job, to go up and vote. Up or down, straight up, yes or no, up or down on bills, standalone bills. That's how Congress should work in practice. And it seems like we never get that. And the fact that we couldn't even get this for a vote, and we're not likely to by the end of the weekend when the congressional term is set to expire, the fact that we're not likely to speaks very poorly of our political institutions, of our institutional politics right now. But McConnell thinks that he can protect his incumbents, that by not voting, he's doing them a favor. See, I don't know about that. I think it's very likely that both of these Republicans are likely to lose their seats on Tuesday, and it's because Mitch McConnell did not get them on record voting in favor of. You got to get people on the record. If they're not on the record, it's just a bunch of it's just theater. It's just finger wagging and theater, and people are sick of it, man. People want to see our elected officials actually vote. That's their entire job. Of course, they hate their job, and that's why I think these people are likely to lose on Tuesday.